Welcome back to Trinidad and Tobago. I'm Hema Ramsoon. Thanks again for staying with us. Hopefully, I'll figure out if we have some video to play or not. But we're going to talk about a sportsman who was declared, he came out to the world saying that he is openly gay. He came out to GQ magazine, well-known men's magazine, Metro Man, the next level of man, the in-style man, but an NBA player, and a sport that's considered to be predominantly a macho sport in the mind of most NFL, NBA. It's really a man's thing, sweating, pushing, all of those things.
Yes.
Now, a number of issues have kind of come to the fore as a result of this. And I'm not just talking about this incident, but recently we had a number of actors and actresses coming out and saying that they are gay and they are preaching acceptance, preaching tolerance.
Yes.
What exactly does all of this mean as a nation? Because we're changing, obviously, and what does it mean as a people?
Yes. Well, good morning. Good morning, Trinidad and Tobago, once again. I'm here this morning representing the psychologist perspective. Okay, so I'll be attempting to give that to the best of my ability. The thing is, we have had gays, lesbians, etc. as part of our society for a very long time. It's not something new that has just suddenly come up. I think what is new is what you were pointing out, is that more people are now comfortable in coming out and saying exactly what their orientation is. Okay?
We're going to share with our viewers a clip. This is from an international newscast, just to bring our discussion into context, because it obviously has raised a number of questions. But the bottom line is, what are you going to tell your children? How do we preach unity, acceptance, tolerance, and at the same time, are you comfortable having that discussion?
NBA veteran has become the very first active professional male athlete in major U.S. sports history to make such an admission. Collins was the 18th pick of the 2001 NBA draft out of Stanford University. During his career, he helped the Nets reach back-to-back NBA finals. Collins says he goes against the quote-unquote gay stereotype, which is why a lot of players will be shocked when they hear the news. However, Collins has received an outpouring of positive support from some very high-profile figures, including former U.S. President Bill Clinton, NBA Commissioner David Stern, and future Hall of Fame players Kobe Bryant and Steve Nash, to name a few.
Well, that was a story there, the openly gay sportsman. We're going to go straight to the 7 a.m. newscast. When we come back, we're going to have more for you. We're going to continue this discussion. Really, what are you going to tell your children? What do you say to them to ensure that you promote equality? You ensure that we have non-discrimination, really, in our homes. A couple of years ago, the discussion people were having would have been about racism and accepting each race. So now the nature of the discussion clearly has changed, and we're looking at sexual orientation and embracing all. It's a very taboo topic. So when we come back, we're going to tell you how to do it. Stay with us. We're continuing this discussion, the openly gay sportsman. So, Daryl, the nature of the discussion has changed. 20 to 30 years ago, that discussion would have been about racial tolerance.
Yeah, that's right.
It's funny, over the weekend, I went to see the movie 42. And we were discussing at the end of that movie that in 20 years' time, the conversation that people would be having would probably be the first openly gay baseball player who came out. Because obviously the story is about Jackie Robinson, who was the first. So he was the first colored baseball player, and obviously all the trials and tribulations that he went through. But what do you tell your children when they put on this newscast and you see, okay, international news, Barack Obama's calling to say, okay, good luck. What do you tell your children?
All right. So a couple of things that you have to put into place. Number one, parents, I'm assuming in a two-parent situation, okay? It's very important that parents know exactly what position they have taken with respect to this issue, and that they know exactly what message they want to give their children. One of the worst things that could happen is that you have two parents and one has one perspective and another has a different perspective, and they're sending mixed messages to the child, okay? So they must agree. And that is a personal choice that is entirely up to the parents themselves. They must be certain to address the subject directly, because if you don't address the subject, somebody else will. And it may be what you don't want your child to hear.
So that comes back to it. So Barack Obama obviously preaching a message of tolerance, of unity, non-discrimination. This is still a topic that is a little taboo in Trinidad and Tobago. The U.S. is obviously taking the forefront on this. The U.S. politicians, we have openly gay senators and openly gay members of parliament now. But we are still in that gray area.
That's right.
But we're influenced by everything we see on the American media.
Yes, all right. So I was setting the context before. Now this is where I'm actually getting to, how you deal with your children. I think there must be an emphasis on respecting the person as an individual, separate and apart from their orientation. Okay? One of the reason why we have problems with intolerance is when people don't separate the two and they identify a person, or the person's orientation or the person's race or ethnicity becomes who the person is.
And then, Daryl, okay, so some mothers will be, I don't know, suppose I go and have this conversation and then I influence my child's sexual orientation, because it's a fear factor.
Yeah.
There are a lot of fear factors because there are so many unanswered questions relating to this topic.
That's right.
So what do you say to the mothers then, who will then come and tell you, I don't want to have this conversation because I don't want to influence my child?
Well, there's absolutely no evidence to suggest that talking about it with your children will cause them to become however that happens, because we still don't agree and understand exactly why, all right? But there's no evidence to suggest that speaking to a child will actually make them choose a particular orientation. Matter of fact, a lot of the research, and this is research that has been conducted extensively, seems to suggest that people don't really have a choice, even though it's listed as a choice, so it's given as a choice. But from what the research has said so far, right, it's not so much a choice as a, I don't know what's the correct way to put it. Maybe people have an orientation, but it's not like people sit down and decide, well, what am I going to be?
Do you think
I'm going to do this or I'm going to do that?
Are also comfortable, because we're now inundated with it? Recently you had, I think it was the Academy Awards, or one of the American actresses came out, and she, after 30 years, admitted that she was gay.
Yes.
And she said she loves her lifetime partner, a lifelong partner.
Well,
so children are now going to ask, like, Mommy and Daddy, what is it?
Yeah, interesting thing. I've observed that children are actually more comfortable with this than adults, because they have been exposed to it more from an early age. If you look, for example, a lot of the sitcoms that we see on television, there's like Modern Family and so on, which has openly gay couples on it. And so it's typified as being it's typified as being normal.
But a lot of parents are afraid of that. I have a family member that will not allow their child to look at Modern Family or to look at even Family Guy, because Stewie is considered to be a little in between. And they are so fearful of it. And it's such a fear factor, and I don't know whether we will be, as a society, ready to address these issues openly.
You cannot, I must emphasize this again, you cannot cause your child to choose a particular orientation by speaking about it. They are going to be exposed to it anyway, and as a parent, you have to make a choice whether you want somebody else out there to school your child on what it's about, or whether you want to take that responsibility yourself.
Now, and I keep saying the nature of the conversation has changed, because really a couple of years ago it would have been about racism and talk. Is it the same conversation, Daryl?
There are some similarities. Of course, the mechanics of it are different, but there are some similarities, all right? So what I was saying, respect for the individual, okay? Parents must also emphasize that this applies to adults. Okay? Because some children, a little boy may wonder, for example, but my best friends are all boys as well, so does that mean I am gay too? So you have to make the distinction. This is not the same thing as having a best friend or having best friends that you play with. This applies to adults. Okay? Respect for the individual. Age-appropriate messages. Adults sometimes think that, you have to speak to a child the way that you would speak to an adult. So there's absolutely no need for graphic descriptions of anything at all. There's absolutely no need to get into the mechanics of what it's about, all right? It's simply explaining that some people, some men, you put it in terms that the child will understand. So if the child, for example, is between the ages of, let's say, 5 to roughly 7, and let's say they come from a 2-parent home and they have questions about it, you might say, well, some people prefer to have a partner who is also a daddy or a mommy. You put it in terms that the child understands. So you simplify it, you break it down, and you don't make it something, you don't panic the child and create anxiety in the child about it, because anxiety actually could make somebody more curious about something than not, if that's what your concern is.
Changing the stereotype. So obviously we look at sports as being the man's thing, a manly man's thing. Now obviously this is changing. We had recently the first openly a soccer player, and that was in France. And football is considered and rugby are considered to be the
very
masculine
manly sports,
you know. And now that you have that, you will still see parents whose children maybe, like, you may have a son who may be more artistic, as opposed to being the one that will run on the field and push another boy down in these aggressive sports.
Yes.
How does that change the whole understanding of sports and understanding what a man is supposed to be, what a boy is supposed to be, or what a girl is supposed to be?
Yeah. Well, you know, the execution of sports is a skill, okay? And that skill, it doesn't matter, let me take it out of context a little bit. It shouldn't matter what ethnicity a person is, for example, in order for them to excel at a particular skill, at a particular discipline. So we will look at it in the same context. A person's personal orientation does not necessarily have anything, you know, directly to do with their skill or their ability at a particular sport. So if they're a footballer, they're a footballer. How, you know, their personal orientation is their private business. That is not something that affects their play or that should affect your perception of them as a sports person.
Closing comments to Trinidad and Tobago, and I know a number of parents, this is still a very touchy subject.
It is. It will be.
Still, and as a nation, as a society, we are yet to come to a position, because the U.S. administration have made it quite clear they are going in a particular direction.
That's right.
They're preaching tolerance, acceptance, non-discrimination. You still have some states that are still iffy, but they are moving in a certain direction. Yeah. We are yet to come to terms with what it is even considered male-female relationships or even marriage or the gender policy. So it's quite gray, but you're seeing it happening in the American media more and more, and you're right. The sitcoms are representing families that are quite unique.
They are. I would like to emphasize again, parents need to be clear in their own minds about what they think, or as clear as possible, so that they send a common message to their children. Respect for the individual first and foremost, not labeling somebody or judging them strictly by their personal choices or their personal orientation. Delivering, as I said, age-appropriate messages to that child that they understand in terms that make sense to them, emphasizing that this is an adult business. This is not the same thing as a child having a best friend of the same orientation, just to sort of keep them calm and panicking and so on. And, you know, just really, really putting the focus more on this is a person's personal choice, and we should not judge them as an individual because of this.
If your child comes home and says that they think they may be attracted to the same sex, what do you then tell them?
You definitely don't shut them down. So you will want to have a conversation with them about exactly what they mean, okay? Because depending on the age of the child, they could be confused about it, but you need to speak with them and, you know, create an open atmosphere so that they can talk more about it, so that you can get to understand exactly where they're coming from. Because it may be mixed feelings. Okay, and it may not necessarily be something to be, for a parent who doesn't want this for their child, it may not be something to panic about. But if you leave doubt and confusion and uncertainty, you create more anxiety in that child, and there's more chance that they may end up, you know, being affected by, I don't know, external influences, let's say, that may not be what you want for your child.
What you want for your child, what your child wants for them. A very, very gray area here, and it's interesting as society develops, you know, because you have all the religious perspectives, you have parents, and all of this influences what you think your child should be.
But I have to say something, I don't know of any religion that preaches intolerance and that preaches hate, okay? I'm yet to see that. I'm yet to see those words documented anywhere. People may disagree on how people should be treated, and then it becomes a sort of a human perspective, a human judgment. But I'm yet to see any religion that talks about God and talks about love and at the same time preaches intolerance and hate. So we have to start there.
Understanding our differences, respecting each individual, understanding personal choice versus what you may think is acceptable or not. It's sort of a gray area now. Society is changing. 20 or 30 years ago, the conversation was about racism and accepting those with different colored skin, with a different type of skin, different shade of skin, different type of hair than you are. Now we're talking a different kind of acceptance, a different kind of tolerance. Next week, Daryl will be joining us to discuss interracial couples, conflicts, when you have different cultures coming together and making the marriage work. We'll now take a very short break. When we come back, we'll have more for you. Stay with us.